I can tell you about my life. I don't know.
Yeah, that's what we want to hear.
I know it. I know it.
That's good. Don't mess this up.
Oh, okay.
The narrative needs to stay consistent, Dad.
Are we going to talk about Jed owing me that money?
Uh-huh.
I can't. Oh, never mind.
Hey guys, today we're doing Spill the Beans Family Edition. It's Father's Day, so I'm going to sit down with my dad for an episode of Spilling the Beans. So, quick backstory on my dad is his main career was as a Cleveland police officer for almost 30 years. And on the side of that, he had a personnel security business that he made more money on a part-time basis than he did in his full-time job, and always kind of balanced the two of them and had a lot of other things going on. I got a ton of respect for what he's been able to build, and he grew up without a father figure, and he's got 4 kids and is like the ultimate father figure, and somebody I very much look up to and want to share his story with you. So I'm excited to sit down with my dad on Spilling the Beans. Dad, welcome to Spill the Beans.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure.
All right, man. All right, so this is the family edition, I guess, of Spill the Beans. And I sit down with a lot of entrepreneurs of all different backgrounds. And so I know you've played around a little bit with real estate and really just that one duplex, right?
Yeah.
Well,
and the single, too.
And the single and grandma's house and some other stuff, right?
Yeah. That's correct.
But more of what I think I want to talk about is your security business and what that, how you came into having a security company, kind of some of the lessons learned by becoming an entrepreneur and becoming a business owner, and what some of the hurdles were, and what some, like looking back, telling yourself, 30, 40 years ago when you were first starting that business, things that you wish you knew back then that you know now. So, you good with that?
Sure.
All right.
Certainly.
All right. So, first off, Dad, got a ton of respect for you, for everything that you've done, that you've accomplished.
That's very kind.
And for people who are watching, my dad, essentially came out of the police force in what, 71?
73.
73, worked as a police officer, and there was a really unique program at the time where you could work as a police officer and then also get paid, or not get paid, but they would pay for all your education, right?
Right. Uh-huh.
And so from 73 to what, 87?
87.
My dad got an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and then a PhD. So the first in our family to earn a PhD and have a doctorate. And I don't call him Dr. Bratz, but other people do, right? and the first in our family. So like blazing the trails on that side of things. And I remember you always had like 3 jobs or something going on at all times.
Yes.
When I was growing up. And one of those was the security company. So, I don't know, I guess in your own words, tell me a little bit about the journey of becoming a police officer and then how that transitioned into, starting your own business.
Sure. Well, as you said, I started on the police department, and I was going up the ladder, and then for a period of time, I was attending college. So at that particular point, the staff there, the administration of the police department, put me into the training academy. And so I was there, and my transition into business occurred as a result of a telephone call that the training academy received for a gentleman who was the chief executive officer of a small neighborhood hospital in the inner core of the city. And so as a result, he had problems with his security. They had a lot of different issues there. And the call kind of got transferred around and eventually came to me in some, way. And I started talking to this gentleman. He said, well, I got your name from probably one of the other officers in the field. He said, I'd like you to come in and evaluate my security force. Well, I was working on my degrees and stuff like that, so that was of some help. And I had taken and part-time taught some criminal justice programs and security programs. So anyway, I get to the point.
So that the police job led you to getting these degrees, which then gave you an in to teaching at the associate and undergrad level criminal justice classes.
Correct.
So now you've got experience on top of experience, which then gives you a demand in the marketplace for somebody to come in and wants you to come and take a look from a third-party perspective at their internal security.
Right. I had never done it before. I did not have a security company. I didn't have, I had 4 kids.
Yeah.
I was working on the degrees, and of course I had the full-time job with Cleveland. And so as a result, through the conversation, I said, well, I don't know if I'm the guy for, I never met the guy personally at first at that point. And then he said, well, why don't you come in and, we'll talk. So always kind of interested in other ventures and things like that. I did go in, I talked to him. And he was out of Denver, and it was...
And realizing you're talking to him from a personal standpoint, right? Because the police force couldn't do anything to help this guy, right?
No.
So he's like, hey, do you do anything, on the off hours? Can you support... Like, we hire off hours security guards for our apartment buildings, right? And these are off hours cops as security guards for our apartment buildings. And so you went in from the person. Did you ever think you would start a business?
No, not really. I mean, I always had interest. I was doing a little bit of that real estate, certainly not to the notable amount that you have. But I mean, I was kind of doing that. I had the school, I had the work, I had the families and the obligations. I wasn't really looking for a business, and I'm sure some of the viewers and some of the entrepreneurs that you work with, they come into this in various ways and in various manners for different reasons.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to be successful to a certain extent, but sometimes you have to see the opportunity in front of you, and when you do, you have to grasp it and run. Now, when I was talking to the individual, and I did do an assessment for him at the hospital, but the major issue was that he had a very, very poor private security company. Because I would check at night, on weekends, at 2 o'clock on Tuesday, at 4 o'clock in the morning on Saturday, various times, and it was pretty obvious that they were just poor personnel. It was really an HR issue at that point. So I went to him and I said, here's the issue, here's the report, and I said, hey, very good, have a wonderful life. And I was out the door, and he goes, well, wait a minute. He says, you be my security. I said, me? I said, I got too much to do. I got this, I got that, I got that. He said, well, I said, I don't have a company. He said, well, just make one. I said, make one? I said, where do I get this from? You know what I mean?
Resourcefulness is the ultimate resource.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say he talked me into it, but it was like, and I remember his name very much, but I don't want to quote it here, but I mean, my point was, I said, well, I really don't have an operation. I said, how do I do it, And he said, well, call me back in 2 weeks and work on it. So, of course, I left there thinking, I'm not going to do that. So by the time I got home, I said, I think I am going to do this. You know what I mean?
You got dollar signs in your eyes. Somebody wants to give you money. It's hard to say no.
In about 25 minutes, life changed, So I didn't have, it wouldn't afford me to hire off-duty police officers like you were referencing, but
because they'd cost too much.
Yeah. Their hourly was pretty dramatic in comparison to private security enterprise, and this was unarmed, which made it even more cost-effective.
So you just need a body there, somebody who's reliable to show up and walk around this hospital and make sure that nothing's getting broken into, there's not vandalism happening, and people aren't getting stolen from the hospital, right? Right,
and being there, being vigilant, being energetic, being active, helping people, customer relations, building relationships, and so forth. So as a result, I started formulating, I had a group of about 5 or 6, if you will, civilians who I knew would be interested in that because of my teaching, which was ongoing anyway. I had access to, student populations. And some of the student populations I had were of the adult ages. There were folks in their 40s and 50s and 20s. It was a wide range of.
So these are people who wanted to get into criminal justice and were looking for opportunities and would raise their hand, and you would hire them?
Yes. That's basically it. I knew that they were interested. I knew I had a handful or a core group that I could, have some confidence in as a result of this enterprise. Because I wasn't licensed, I wasn't insured, I didn't have a mechanism of payroll.
Yeah.
You know, as you have mentioned in some of your previous podcasts, you can't be all things to all people or your organization all the time. You have to divest, and that's difficult to do for a founder.
Yeah, because you see opportunity and you want to take on all of it, but the reality is the more niche you are, I found the more successful most of those businesses are.
I agree. So as a result, at the outset, it was me, myself, and I, and trying to organize this. I mean, I had to incorporate. I had to find uniforms. I had to get uniforms. I had to get attire for them.
Yep.
Had to get, like I said, LLC or some
Payroll.
function. Yeah, all the administrative stuff behind the scenes that aren't seen. So it took me a little while, but certainly within the calendar month, I was pretty well to go. I had been licensed. You had to take a test down in Columbus, Ohio. So as a result, putting this together, I was fairly confident I could do that. I think the various, once we got in there and the removal of the former agency organization and our group came in there, I think things settled down a lot. But even the incidents were coming. It was in a core neighborhood with a lot of different things coming to the emergency room at 4 o'clock in the morning. There's some things you didn't want. So it was an effort, but it ended up growing and getting bigger.
So how did you grow it? Like how did you come across more clients? Did you do more? Because one of the things I'm noticing is you had access to these resources, and you looked at the opportunity and the resources and access to resources that you had, and figured out how to, make this support that kind of a thing. And as you said, hey, I came in and I just consulted with these people on what they should do. Like, we've talked about this before, management by walking around, right?
Yeah.
And that's what you did. You ended up coming in, walking around this thing at 4 o'clock in the morning when nobody else would come and walk. Like, the owner probably knew that the existing security company was dropping the ball, and he just didn't go to the property at 4 o'clock in the morning, or didn't go at midnight on a Saturday, or didn't go at 7 o'clock in the morning on the weekend and see what was happening. And if he was managing by walking around, that would be easy. And so did you see that as a kind of foot in the door for other businesses and other factories and foundries and apartments and hospitals?
Very much.
So that was like a service that you would offer as a one-time, and then the idea would be, hey, if you want better security, I have a company?
Well, here's what I found, and this might have just been the greater Cleveland area in that particular time frame, but there were so many major facilities and organizations that needed a lot more coverage than they were getting.
Right.
And so basically, fortunately, just by word of mouth and referral, I would get a random call. And then I picked up this one, and I picked up this one. And then I did, I had a lot of housing projects for a while, a lot of them. Probably the 3 largest ones in Cleveland for a period of time. And
multifamily apartments, you're saying?
Yes, with hundreds of units,
Yep.
in multiple buildings.
Yep.
So I mean,
and all low income stuff.
Very much.
Which is probably why you didn't want me to get into real estate and multifamily, because a little tarnished.
That's my little inroad.
That's your experience.
We're going to have to
with
edit
it.
that part. You know what I mean? But nevertheless, I mean, it got to the point where I could not handle all of it that was coming in, because some I didn't want to handle. And I assure, I'm greedy enough to look at it, but I don't know if I was greedy enough to accept the responsibilities that it sent to me. So, I mean, once I got into the housing and hospitals, we got into retail, we got into malls, we got into strip retail centers, we got into a lot of different venues that I can think of.
The factories and foundries is one of the things I remember.
That's right. That's right. I mean, factories came around, and it tended to be, some of them were very difficult to handle, from a management standpoint. For various reasons, I suspect all your viewers and you need good management. You need good supervision. If you don't have supervision and you don't have oversight, it falls,
Yeah.
and it falters quickly.
Well,
so you got to be vigilant.
It's I remember us, and us talking about this over the years. Like, you were the most responsible and capable of handling security at the accounts that, the massive companies like, these multi-state, multinational type companies. They wouldn't even look at some of these other things, right?
That's right.
If they're not handling security for a major sports venue or a concert venue where they can, employ 100+ people at that single venue, at that single event, then they weren't even interested. And of the security companies that would take on the factories and the foundries and the hospitals and the apartment buildings and those, like, all you did was what you said that you would do. And it's amazing how that differentiates somebody in a marketplace, right? Like, if you just do what you say you're going to do and you show up and you follow through on it, then all of a sudden you took a huge part of the market share, because you just, again, did what you said you were going to do.
Yeah, the major security operations across the country and the world would not take the accounts that I took, only because they were difficult accounts. I don't think I need an award, but on the other hand, they didn't want them. So what happens if I own a multi-unit housing development and I have 16 buildings and they're 3-4 stories,
Yep.
and I have multiple units, I'm looking at a major enterprise. So and so they didn't want to handle all the things that impact adversely on them. So what they would do is hire another company that was probably of less value and benefit and problematic to them. So then what would happen is it would be so problematic to them at the security level and this function of
Yep.
private security that they would look. And so I kind of, as you mentioned, I found a niche right in the center of sorts, because I couldn't compete very well with the major organizations, that are all over the country. But I could, in that particular venue, be fairly successful.
And you
luckily we were.
Yeah, and so you were one of the bigger fish in a smaller pond, right? As opposed to trying to be a big fish in a big pond. Hey, let me just own this market. And I think that's like, hey, let me just be the best of the guys in this category, right? In this niche. And it grew substantially, to the point where the income from your part-time business was greater than from your full-time job.
Yes.
How come you never left a full-time job as a policeman?
I think it was a couple things. There were a lot of people at the kitchen table that night with me, and so I said to myself, I needed that stability, and I had years of service by that time. So I didn't want to just jump out and, it was a financial decision and an emotional one. There were times where I thought to myself, if I could transfer this business collectively to one of the kids we had, or, any partnerships that you guys would form, that might be beneficial. But then, candidly, I looked at it, and the sites were so difficult, that I didn't want to burden the kids, with those kind of obligations. They're much more dramatic, because you've got to go into these projects at odd times and things like that. I mean, it's one thing to make a profit, but at what cost?
Right.
And so you kind of pick and choose, what time and how much do you spend with the family, or do you do after activities or socialize in some fashion, and then how much do you spend in business? It has to be a mix, a mesh that works for all aspects of your life. And for me to take to take that burden. Now, I did hire some people and ex-police officers to administer when I was, working the regular job, but I didn't want to leave that and because I had a sense of security in the police position of who I was and my status and position and so forth. So I didn't have to move. There was an eventual time toward the end of me closing the business and selling it where I had, I was substantially in a situation of retiring from Cleveland, going to another second career in a charity nonprofit field that I thought, well, I guess now's the time. And so as a result...
To what? To close the business?
Yeah, to close it out, to sell aspects of it off on an individual basis. Because I think I was ready too. You know what I mean? It's I don't want to cry on the video, but it was a tiring job. I mean, it's not as if you can lock your door at 5 o'clock on Friday and I'll see you Monday morning. This was
I think that's
24 hours a day, and the holidays were the most.
I remember.
At Christmas, New Year's.
I remember you getting a call one Christmas morning, and you had to somebody no call, no show, and you had to run out and I don't know, bridge the gap or something for a few hours until somebody else came in.
Yeah.
And no, I mean, and that's one of those things. Like, people think entrepreneurship's this glorious thing, and today it's like glorified to, travel around the world and work off your laptop and do all these other things. And it's like, it's not realistic, right? Whenever people are like, well, were your parents supportive of your entrepreneurial endeavors, Tim? I'm like, yeah, they were super supportive, but at the same time, like, I understand why you're like, Tim, just go get a job, right? I remember the one time, I'm failing after failing after failing in business, and having to borrow money to make the minimum payment on my credit card, to make the mortgage payment, and you're like, hey, just go get a friggin' job, right? And I was like, Dad, like what? Like the other 97%? I'm not one of the 90. You're like, yeah, like everybody else, go get a friggin' job. And I was like, no, I'm one of the 3% that's gonna own a business. And I remember that, and I reflect on that because you knew what it was like to own a business. You knew, like, just getting kicked in the crotch over and over and over and over again, having all the financial stresses and like the liability that comes with it, right? Like and the sacrifices that need to be made, and the fire at one of the places that you guys secured, and all of a sudden you got this multi-7-figure lawsuit that could potentially come on you, and you're like, oh shit, why do I need this liability? Why do I need this stress? And I think coming from a business owner, entrepreneurial standpoint, like, a lot of people glorify owning your own business, but it's not fun. It's very troublesome. There are very many sleepless nights. There's a lot of stresses, but when you push the pendulum on the side of that, it can swing back and create the financial and lifestyle type of benefits that it has at the same time. So
sure.
The thing is, like, for me, it's just how do I kind of graduate out of the headaches and continue to grow the business, and at the same time not take on more stresses, liabilities, failures, things that can wipe me out, kind of a thing either,
Sure. And I think whether it's an entrepreneur, a business person, looking at a degree or whatever the venture is, everybody looks at this result, this outcome, but actually I think you achieve that success because it's a journey.
Yep.
You move through it with these various successes and the pitfalls that confront. So it's kind of hill and valley kind of situation, and then ultimately you get to that point. But even when you get to that point and you're making $1 bazillion and you're still going to have a journey.
Yeah.
It's whatever this other subsequent outcome or result you want to be. I think in ownership and entrepreneurship in general, it's always going to be a venture. It's always going to be some movement that you want to make to be different, maybe a different area, different category, a different type of product or service or whatever,
I've always, on my journey, it's been, hey, if I can get to this level, I'll be all set, right? And then I get to that level, I'm like, I got to get to this level.
Right.
All right, now I need to trim the fat and get to this point. And then there's always, if I just get there, I think I'm going to be okay, and it never is okay or whatever. There's always, like you said, another, not necessarily growth, but just like, I don't know, a more secure position, a more ambitious position, a more whatever the next step is. There's always a next step. You think that you just arrive at some point, and that has never occurred for me.
No, I think at the peak of our security operation, I had around 40 sites and 200 plus employees, hundreds of employees.
While you had a full-time job.
Yeah,
And you were teaching.
And I was looking at this, and really it was like it was surprising to me how large it had become.
Yeah.
You know, and I tried, I think all business owners try to control, if you will, the business, to be there, to be active, to see the sites, to know the people, and stuff like that. And it just, it gets to be burdensome at some times.
And so,
even just in this greater Cleveland area, I couldn't make all the commitments that needed to be made. And those tended to be the sites where, or the organizations where I would have problems, I would have issues because of the lack of supervision and oversight.
Mm-hmm. So how did you start winding that down? Because you didn't sell the company, right? Obviously, none of the kids took it over. Hallie is in the hospitality industry. Todd went into criminal justice, but went into the federal side of things, federal law enforcement. Troy took some odd careers, not odd careers, but just different kinds of careers, and kind of jumped around. And now he's heavy into real estate as a real estate agent. And then obviously I started a business. So when you realized that none of us were going to take it over, and you didn't really want us to take it over, how did you wind it down? Did you have an exit strategy in place? Did you have an exit, like what did that look like?
I'd love to tell you it was formal, but it was more transitional. At a certain point, when I saw that my career would be retirement with the police department, I looked at the sites that were most profitable with the less headaches in some kind of matrix that showed me that I could make this particular profit margin on these various sites. Instead of 40, I have 12 or 14.
With the least amount of headaches.
With the least amount of headaches, which was a variable, but you never know what's going to come in.
Right, but you can kind of create it. You can rate it, 1, 2, or 3, right? This is A, B, or C, or D class of a location, which is kind of like what I've done with my apartment buildings actually recently. It's like,
I do think that has some similarity from your
I think there's a lot of parallels.
Yeah. And what I would do is, as I looked even at this last, let's say, dozen or 15 sites, I don't remember how long, I would have other types of security who would come in there, and then I would essentially sell them that contract, and so I could phase it down a little bit. And then when I got to
so it's kind of like subleasing, right? Like you have the contract, and then you just make a spread or sell it to them. Say, hey, this is a 3-year contract, making this amount of money, this amount of profit,
right?
Or this amount of revenue, and then they can deal with the profit and kind of break it out to see what value it is for them, and then they would just give you a lump sum of whatever it is, 30 grand, 100 grand, 20 grand, whatever.
Yeah, very good. I mean, it got fairly proportional, where I would just piecemeal it down, and then when I was retiring from Cleveland and going to this other job that had some travel involved, it was a tinge, not problematic, but it was an issue on my mind that I couldn't get to the point that I wanted to. So I was really, I think, I was down to about 4 or 5 sites, but they were very, obviously, fairly lucrative to me in what I was doing. So I'm thinking,
I was just going to say, my favorite part, because I remember this, is you had these 4 or 5 sites, and I remember them being, they weren't a problem. They made a bunch of money, but you're like, hey, I don't want the business anymore. I'm just going to keep on increasing the rates. And you just kept on jacking the rates up.
And they kept staying with me.
I was like, you're like, damn, I really missed, I should have been charged this much for a lot longer of a time.
Yeah, I know, right? You told me that. Anyway.
I'd have a bigger inheritance today,
Yeah,
Jed.
yeah. It's very small. Anyway, suffice it to say that, yeah, it got to the point where I was down to one site at a good-sized factory in the city, and still trying to handle it and doing some, travel and stuff. So I eventually passed on that, passed it down to another organization and another company. But I mean, the transition wasn't like, July 1st, I'm out of here, and
Right,
this
right.
is all yours, and good luck to you. And a lot of it was, with some thought, but not overly dramatic
Yep.
on my part.
Yeah, it wasn't a total exit of the whole company, which I think a lot of people think, oh, there's this one payday where I just cash in my chips and I walk away, and it's not like that, right? I've been trying to wind down and sell some of these apartment buildings since COVID hit, like 3 years, and they're still in the process of being stabilized and then exited, and it's not, and I checked, sold off a bunch of them, but there's still a bunch more that I want to exit and just haven't done so yet because it's
Yeah.
a process.
Right. I mean, because I still wanted the control mechanism, regardless of how it is. So I had a dispatch center. I had, people that would dispatch, and a centralized telephone system. So it got to the point where I could phase out a lot of them, but keep that particular central entity. And I remember the last site on the last day, waking up, some ungodly hour, thinking to myself, I don't have anybody to call.
Yeah.
It's like, what do I do now? You know what I mean?
Was it more of a sense of like loss of identity, where you're like, were you kind of almost concerned, or was it like, oh man, this is kind of nice. What a relief this is.
A little bit of all, but probably more relief, I
Yeah.
think. You're in law enforcement almost 30 years. You're in this business almost 20. It's overlapping. You got the school, you got the kids and stuff. And it was like, it wasn't, some great revelation for me, but I did feel a sense of more calm, control.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it worked out well. It was an odd way to start it, and maybe an awkward way to close it. But
It served its purpose.
oh
Right?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
it gave our family, shit, you paid for 4 kids, all go to college with cash, right? You got the house paid off, a beautiful home paid off. Now you're able to travel. You got money in the bank and the pension and everything else. And so I think, understanding what is the purpose of the business, and if it was to generate some additional cash flow, maybe it doesn't have to be this huge exit on the back end. And you had the business for what, 15, 18 years?
Yeah, just over 18.
And it had great cash flow for those 18 years while you got 3 kids in school, and you build a new house and you're paying that down. You got all these other expenses, and I think understanding the purpose of the business and that business serving a certain purpose is all it needs to do, right? It doesn't need to be something more than I think what we try to build it up to be in our heads.
Yeah, and I thought it was just these things tended to be systemic in the fact that one would end and something else would fill it up.
Yeah.
Like this second career of mine. But even so, it was a good experience for me. You think you know everything until you get into business, and you're holding that credit card when the payroll's due.
Yeah.
And it's your own credit card in
Yeah.
your own name.
Yeah.
And you're wondering how much do I have on
Yeah.
this credit card? That's not enough.
Yep.
And a couple payrolls, you'll do that. Not you, but rhetorically for all the
it has
all
happened,
the viewers.
right? It will happen if you own a business. That will happen for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be tight, and you're going to wonder why I'm here. Why am I trying to do this, and what am I trying to do
Yeah.
as a result of it? And for some reason, it just seems to work out for the most part. I mean, I read the literature too as it relates to business startups and failures and things like that. But I think the intent by the entrepreneur to work through it is so
Yeah.
critical to this future success.
Yeah.
I think they need to go in realizing the pitfalls, but on the other hand, seeing on the other side of the fence all the good things that can come to them and what they can do for their family or themselves or society
Yeah.
as a result of their successes.
Yeah, I think that's important because it's you think it's too easy. They don't think about the hurdles and the roadblocks that they're going to face, and they get deterred too easily. And at the same time, if you focus too much on, like if somebody told you the difficult times and some of the headaches that you would deal with in owning a security company, you'd be like, I don't think I'm going to start this thing. I'm just
That's
gonna
why nobody does.
Exactly. Exactly.
Probably, I guess.
If I would have known all the punches in the gut that I would get in real estate over the years and the stresses that would come with it from the very beginning, would I have done it? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. But it's like, I think you got to understand the lifestyle that it provides
Sure.
and the impact that you can make in order to be able to push through a lot of those adversities. And
I agree. I agree. It's a process. It's a journey. You got to think kind of beyond where you are.
Yeah.
And the
Definitely.
hopes and the dreams that you have on what you want to do. And it's not all financial by any stretch. Those are the results. That
Yep.
the ones you can touch and you can see the big number in your bank. But it's really, you want to be successful because you think you're good at this.
Yep.
And I can achieve this and I can do this with this work or this staff or whatever those
Yeah,
little
that's a good point.
mechanisms is that kind of build on it. It's a building process.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's been fun. It's been a fun run.
All right, I want to pivot to personal finance, and you've lived a very thrifty lifestyle, right? You don't spend money on flashy stuff. I found that I did, and I've scaled that back considerably. Obviously, I still like nice properties and stuff like that. But like, give me a couple of the key, I don't know, philosophies and key pillars that you follow from a personal finance standpoint of like money management. When the money comes in, like what are some things, whether those are more philosophical of here's what I believe in, or actual things that you do to manage your money and pay attention to it and like, just understanding like what are some good strategies, tactics, ideas, philosophies, activities, action steps that people can take in order to maintain very good financials, right? Because you never made seven figures in a year before, but you've made multiple six figures in a year, and you are now millionaire next door, right? Like you got the house paid off and all this other stuff, and you've created a great financial cushion for you and mom, and but you worked a job that never, like the police force never paid you more than $100,000, did it?
No.
Yeah. So it's like, what are some of those things that you've done over time in order to, increase your means, decrease, or make sure you're living below your means, things like that?
Gosh, that's pretty deep. I think, number one, I'm from the Midwest.
Yeah.
I'm not a coast person.
Yeah.
That would be, so there's a mindset in the West. Being born and raised in Cleveland, greater Cleveland and so forth.
There's not a, there's,
Your
there's,
friends-
there's still that keeping up with the Joneses, but not as much as you see on the coasts.
Yeah, and
The flashiness.
I think this tends to be work ethic. I still do. I think that, I've been asked similar questions in other regards, and they said, relatively successful, what do you think the primary thing is? And I said, you go to work every day.
Yeah.
You go to work every day. And you got to remember, when you're in Cleveland, you're around Alcoa or whatever they're calling that now, Ford Motor, General Motors, the steel mills, and you have that grouping of individuals of like social economic groups. And so as a result, you do that. I think the other thing was, from my upbringing with my mother, And I've told each one of you kids over the years, we wouldn't buy something that we weren't going to use like soon. If I got a new shirt, it was a wedding or a funeral. I'll
Right.
tell you what, you know what I mean?
Yep.
And I don't remember having a suit. You know, the first time I got on an airplane, I think I was probably 19 going to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri for basic training. You know what I mean? And it wasn't a frivolous youth by any stretch. I mean, we had what we needed. It was just, you saw the value of money as you go up the scale. And, you know, your grandmother worked a lot, and
Yeah.
she kind of gave me that same kind of commitment, you know,
Yep.
that work's important. You know, home is critically important, but work is important too. You're trying to fulfill a position for your own benefit, but also,
Yeah.
you know, for that organization or that company or school or in her case, a grocery store. So, I mean, I think that's the key. You know, there's another adage out there, or cliche, I should say, hey, watch your money. I think it goes without saying, you know. You're going to read a lot of great investments and CDs and, you know, various investment opportunities. You just watch your money in a systemic fashion of what you can do and what you can't do. But you have to start early, you have to start fast, and you have to realize it's going to be a continuing thing, certainly over your working life, but even after. And I think as you age and your family becomes more mature, and so do you, not only in chronological age, but in your thinking, you're going to see the importance of making these decisions on a routine basis and being close and tight, you know, with your finances. So,
Yep.
so you see the value of you know, a work day.
Is there a lesser stress? And I'm not saying that you were stressed, but I know that you pay attention to it. Of, you know, I mean, you look at your personal financial statement every day, don't you?
Just
Or
about.
Just about, right?
Just
You're
about.
looking at your bank accounts, you're looking at your investments, and you add it all up every single day, right? Watching your
That's
money.
why I don't look good today. No.
It's a tough day in the market.
Yeah, yes, it is.
No, but I do mine on a monthly basis, where I do my personal financial statement and my net worth, and, you know, look at this stuff, because mine goes up and down, you know, all the time. And if I looked at it every single day, I think I'd get more stressed out about where the market is and everything. I don't have that much money in the market though, and my properties stay pretty steady. But there's always money in, money out kind of a thing. And one of the things is, like, you know, the kids' accounts, right? And so I got a savings account for each of the kids. I have a 529 plan for each of the kids. I have life insurance, a whole life policy for each of the kids. There's something else. Oh, I have a Roth IRA for each of the kids. And, you know, thinking, hey, this is what it's going to look like by the time they're 20 years old. And, you know, like the life insurance people, they're like, oh, well, you need life insurance. What happens if something happens to your kids? And, you know, you need something that's whole life, that's going to stay with you forever. I'm like, well, I mean, when my kids are 25 or 30 or 40 years old, hopefully they have their own frigging careers and can handle themselves, right? Like,
Right,
I don't
right.
think I need whole life insurance that's out that far, but I do need, I have term life insurance for 20 years, right? And I have, I think, 2 policies that overlap each other, and I think they're each 20 years. And in that time, I see it as something like, let me build up all these accounts that I have for them, build up my own personal net worth, pay down the mortgage balances on all my properties, let the properties appreciate over time. And to me, the idea of, like, that life insurance and saving up for the kids is more of, like, while they're kids, I think. And I don't know, I have the perspective of, hopefully, you know, these accounts are grown and my personal net worth is grown, and by the time my life insurance falls off, all this other stuff is grown and the kids have their own careers where it's less of a stress or something that's on my mind. Is that something that has transitioned for you now that all of us have our own careers and
Yeah.
everything, where you're not worried as much about, oh, I got to leave all this money to these kids? Like, do you feel a sense of calmness or being able to go and spend the money now?
Yes, but I don't.
Right.
You know what I mean. Pretty. You know, can you buy certain things that you are able to afford? The answer is yes. I could pick up on certain things. I think it just gets back to the old, do I need that? And what does that afford me? You know, I've never been one to worry, you know, necessarily. You know, I'm not that humble, you know, but, you know, people live their life, you know, if they're comfortable, if they're happy, if it's enjoyable, maybe they're in a good relationship, or, you know, they'll fend for themselves, and I think they can do it. It's never been an issue for me to, you know, puff up and say, man, you know, I'm good. You know, I don't know.
So that
other people evaluate you and me.
But what I'm hearing, I guess, is like you get more value out of knowing that you have the safety and the cushion and the safety net of having the money there and having the income there, rather than spending it on definitely material things.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah.
But you're also not afraid, like, to spend money on the kids, right, and the grandkids, and vacations and experiences and going out to dinner and those kinds of things.
I would rather spend it on the grandkids than on you guys. But
What about me, though?
By far, quantum leaps. Actually,
you spent plenty of money on me over the years. So no, I appreciate it. So, well, Dad, it's been awesome. I appreciate having you on Spill the Beans.
I tell you what, this was fun. Fun.
Not bad, right?
Get that edit machine going quick. Thanks, man.
Wait, well, I appreciate you. I love you, Dad.
Well, thank you.
You're my best friend.
You're mine. Hey, thank you. Thank you so much.
Hey, so for all the dads out there, I want to wish you a happy Father's Day. Dad, I appreciate you being on Spill the Beans, and hopefully you guys got a lot of value out of that and get, you know, just kind of a different perspective, and maybe see some of those seeds of thought that I have about business and life and personal finance, and see kind of who planted some of those seeds, and how that's kind of cultivated my life over the past 37 years. And so if you got some good value out of this, I'd love to hear some of your takeaways. Put it in the comment section below. Like the video if you would. Share it with anybody else who you think might get some good value out of it. Until next time, I'll see you guys next week on Spilling the Beans.